Delahunty.
Chair, he mihi nui ki te wiki o te reo Māori, te reo rangatira, te reo tino ātāhua, te reo tūturu, te reo kotahi o Aotearoa. Before I speak about the overseas assistance and aid, I'd like to just talk a little bit about foreign affairs, since that's part of the appropriation. How's the war going, is it? How's that going? $65 million worth of it. How's the TPPA going, that thing that was never going to take away our medicine, but we just find out today that it is going to take away our cheap medicine? It's going really well if you don't think about the real value of the way we use our money in this country, the way we make trade deals, the way we actually approach peace and defence. It's a bit of a disaster. And so foreign affairs at the moment, defence, a number of these portfolios that are covered by this appropriation are actually a real mess. We've actually done really well in helping polarise things further in the Middle East, and at the same time in another appropriation refusing to take any more refugees except the bare minimum. So on the one hand, 65 million is going in to promote the wars that create more polarisation. On the other hand, we're not going to help people whose lives are destroyed by war. So that's a really great start for foreign affairs. I'd like to talk, however, about overseas development and assistance, because it is our privilege to be in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the Pacific, the wonderful Pacific, where we have relationships with a number of Pacific nations, and some of those relationships ought to include a healthy and honest relationship around aid, because we are the privileged, the wealthy, and the exploiter in some cases of the cheap labour of the Pacific. We have been in the past. So we need to have a robust and ethical overseas development and assistance aid program. Under the current government, it's become very economics focused, and to our shame, there is no more of it. In fact, in 2014, our appropriation was 0.27% of GNI, compared to 0.39% for most OECD members. So other countries of a similar size are doing a whole lot better. But unfortunately, the government's a bit mean, a little bit selfish, and is not prepared to go for the real goal for ODA, which would be 0.7% of GNI. We can be the better country because we rely on the relationships we have in the Pacific. Just because we're bigger and more powerful does not mean we should change our aid policies or freeze our aid policies way back in the old days. If the defence budget can be increased, why can't the ODA budget be increased? We are going to make more peace in this world through those aid and development healthy relationships than we're ever going to make by sending people over to kill people who already think that killing people is a solution. So I think it's quite important to look closely at the ODA and look at what it should be addressing. We're on the Security Council. We're in a position to talk about security and aid, and all of those things should be focused on addressing climate change, engendering more local participation and gender equity, dare I say, since if anyone saw the Herald story today will know that the government's not really very big on gender equity at the moment. Their statistics are shameful. But particularly overseas, looking at the economic and social rights of recipient countries. So the ODA needs to be strengthened and it needs to be increased, and there needs to be support for the right kind of development. I sat in this parliament, was it 2 years ago? I can't quite recall, or maybe less, when we had a wonderful conference here that the government did host and fund for Pacific nations to come and talk about the important issues of the Pacific. It was a great conference. The greatest thing about it was their rejection of the government's free trade agenda and their rejection of opening their economies. It was, Mr. I can't remember his title, the Honourable Mr. Bridges forgets that in the last discussion at that wonderful conference, when there was a statement put forward about the Pacific, they said, we don't want your idea of development. Country after country got up and said, in this important relationship around overseas development and around assistance and around trade, we reject your model. We want to protect our resources. Vanuatu was the first speaker, I can quote you their speech, and they were the first people to say it, but country after country got up and said, we know that the natural resources of our world need to be protected. We know that they're vulnerable. We know that our relationship with Australasia and Aotearoa is important, but we want overseas development and assistance that actually allows us to protect our resources They don't want the TPPA any more than many of us in this country do.
The Honourable